Hello, hi everybody. Hi, and welcome to our Q&A here with L.R Ram. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you're coming in, it would be really great if you could introduce yourself in the chat, where you're tuning in from. It's really nice for us to see who's here, who's in the audience. I'm here, I'm Annabel from Listening Books, and I'm here with L.R Ram, and I think you're in Edinburgh.
I am, yes.
Thinking about that, which is lovely. So yeah, if anyone's quite as far as Edinburgh or maybe even further away, please do let us know. We've just been having a little chat before the session, and we thought it would be a good idea to break the ice by asking you all a question first before we launch into Elle's questions. So we were thinking of asking who or what would be your favourite dragon in literature, or any mythical creature. It doesn't have to be a dragon, but if it is a dragon, you get bonus points. So Elle, maybe you can start us off with that. Who or what is your favourite?
I really love the book Seraphina by Rachel Hartman, which has a great kind of like half dragon, half human main character. And then in film, I really love the Russian film I Am Dragon. If people have not seen that, it's basically a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a dragon, where the human decides to teach him how to be a better dragon, but crucially never teaches him to wear a shirt.
That's a bonus.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know what. I can't really think of any dragons. This is not literature, but the only dragon that is screaming out to me is on the Welsh flag. I am Welsh, so I guess the dragon on the Welsh flag would be my favourite fictional dragon. But in literature, I know there's dragons in Harry Potter, but that's beyond me now. The names of the dragons. I'll say my favourite dragon is Everon.
Aw, thank you. On trend. There he is on the cover.
Oh, yeah, Everon is my favourite dragon. So if anyone's been joining as we've been chatting, we've just been talking about our favourite mythical creatures, dragons from literature, or, as I said, from a flag. So it can be anything really. So if you'd like to share with us your favourite fictional mythical creature, that would be great. Oh, we've got a hi from Amy. Hi, Amy. Great to see you. Oh yeah, and if anyone wants to share where they're coming from or introduce themselves in the chat, that would also be great. I'm trying to think of other dragons. Do you have any others? Or any other non-dragons?
Yeah, the Dragon Riders of Pern was a really big influence growing up. It's technically science fiction. What other ones? It's a bunch. I love the dragons in Samantha Shannon's books, in like Priory of the Orange Tree. I'm just like looking at my shelves, being like, where are dragons? Robin Hobb has a bunch of dragons as well. One that's really on my radar is I want to read To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose, I believe her name is. It just won the Nebula. Yeah, so dragons are great.
We do have a dragon in the comments. Laura's favorite is Smaug. Is it Smaug? Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Smaug, yep, from Tolkien.
Yeah. God, I was worried that I was going to say that wrong then. I think that would be blasphemy in the dragon community.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got Catherine said hello. Hi, Catherine. Claire said hello. Hi there. We're all just chatting about our favourite dragons and our favourite mythical creatures, if you'd like to share yours. Laura, maybe you'd like to share why Smaug is your favourite dragon. That could be interesting to hear. Thinking about my favourite dragon, apart from Everon, of course, I guess the dragon on the Welsh flag doesn't really have much of a personality I can talk about.
I suppose you could always create one.
I could create
a story you could tell down the line.
Yeah, I know in school we would read like picture books, Dewi the dragon. They personified the dragon on the Welsh flag because Dewi, which I always like because that's my dad's name. And it is his birthday, so happy birthday, Dad! If you're watching watching.
Happy birthday.
But yeah, so Derry the Dragon is also my favorite fictional character, but I feel like that is very niche to only Welsh primary school children of a certain age.
J.D. Oswald wrote a book about dragons that starts with Dreamwalker, and I think it's very inspired by like Welsh dragons and stuff. He used to live in Wales for a long time.
Oh,
So
I'll need to write that down to read, because that's definitely something that I'd be interested in. I didn't even really know where the dragon came from. Like, and that sounds so stupid not to know where my own flag came from, but I really don't.
I don't know where the Scottish unicorn came from either.
No.
We've got the coolest animals, though. Scotland.
Yeah.
Sorry, the lion's not quite as cool.
No, it's not. It's real. Who wants a real animal on the flag? I think in the Welsh flag is actually the only flag in the world that has a mythical creature on it, which is pretty a claim to fame for Wales. Laura's reason for Smaug is that he's so dramatic over losing one cup. Yeah, a good dramatic dragon is always nice.
Everyone's very dramatic.
Yeah. Oh, yet cunning, Laura's added. Dramatic yet cunning. I feel like that's a very dangerous personality. Claire's commented, the dragons in The Flight of Dragons by Peter Dickinson are my favourite. Can't remember their names. I haven't read that myself, so I'll have to trust you on that, Claire. But I'm sure they're all great. All of these suggestions, probably better than mine. But yeah, if the chat's settled down, if we've all had enough about fictional dragons, then maybe we could get started with the Q&A. Oh, Claire said, I'm showing my age. No, I'm sure you're not. I'm sure it's a classic, Claire. But yeah, maybe we could get started with the Q&A if you feel ready, Al, and in the audience. Okay, so hi again, everybody, and welcome to our live Q&A. I'm Annabel Morgan. I'm here from Listening Books. For any of you who don't know who we are an audiobook charity here in the UK, and we provide audiobooks for anyone who has a disability or illness or learning difficulty that affects their ability to read or hold a book. We have loads of books in our collection, including Dragonfall, which is what we're here to talk about today, as kindly shown by Elle, demonstrated. But yeah, so that's who I am. We're here at the Virtual Village Hall, and they're great. They're another charity, and they do loads of amazing events every week. And this month, June, they're celebrating Pride Month, so that is also great. So if you'd like to join any more events, do just check them out on Facebook, because they've got loads for everyone to be interested in. But of course, that's not why we're here today. We are here to talk all about Dragonfall, L.R Ram's latest book. So thank you so much, Elle, for being here today. We're really excited to learn more about the book. I am going to give a quick little introduction. I hope I don't embarrass you too much. To start us off, the L.R Ram is a Sunday Times best-selling author and creative writing coach. Their work includes space operas, near-future thrillers, the award-winning Micah Gray trilogy, and now the Dragon Scales trilogy, which is what we're here to talk about today. We're actually here to talk about the first installment, Dragonfall. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to learn more about the book and the trilogy.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. But if you would like to start us off by just giving a brief overview of the book of Dragonfall, that would be amazing for anyone in the audience who hasn't read or listened yet.
Yeah, so Dragonfall is the first installment of the Dragon Scales series, and it's basically about a human and a dragon falling in love, despite it being quite a bad idea all around. And it's sort of my love letter to old school fantasy. I grew up reading Robin Hobb and Tad Williams and all these other amazing fantasy books, and like growing up, if I went to the library, if I saw a book that had a dragon on the cover, it came home with me. I always loved dragons. And I always knew I wanted to write a dragon book, but I knew I wanted my own take on dragons and to make them a little bit different. And so I settled on dragons who are not actually gods, but worshipped as gods. They have feathers like dinosaurs, because why not? And they're queer and weird, and they can transform into hot humanoid creatures.
That is a great take, and it's very unique for dragons, and I think we all needed that.
Yeah, that was my hope with it. Yeah, so we've got a gender fluid thief, we've got a reluctant assassin who's got a little pet mini wyvern, because who wouldn't want a little dragon the size of a cat who would like curl around your shoulder, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I just put a bunch of things that I really loved into the book and mixed it all up and made it a queer norm, queer celebratory world, and let it out into the world to hopefully connect with people.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. Definitely has with me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
I did want to ask, obviously, it's a trilogy, and I always find authors writing trilogies or sequences so fascinating, especially the process. So do you, when you go into writing the book, do you have the whole trilogy laid out, or do you kind of take it as it comes?
So I had it loosely arced out, but things really change a lot in the making of it, to the point where I am kind of at the end of part 2, and it's got quite a clear, like, pausing point. So there might be a chance that I do a time skip or something going forward. Things are still a little bit up in the air. I know kind of the big picture stuff I want to cover in the series and where I wanted to take the character journeys, but you can only ever pre-plan things so far. Like, you're never quite sure where the characters will go, and you kind of have to follow them. But I've enjoyed following Everin and Arcadie's journey, and Soren as well. So it's a mixture of planning, but being open to where the story takes you.
Yeah, they're very different characters, and not just because Everin is a dragon and has no idea of anything about the world. Which obviously is something that you had to build from scratch because it's a fantasy world. I was wondering, do you find it easier to write about a world from someone like Everin, who doesn't know it at all, or Arcadie, who knows it really well?
Yeah, so that the balance of exposition was probably a really big challenge, because with a secondary world, it's this whole new world. But because, for example, Arcadie's bits are in first person, they probably wouldn't think to explain certain things about the world, because it's just the world they've been raised in, and to them it's commonplace. Whereas Everin kind of being this outsider who very dramatically falls to earth in the first chapter, and their languages are close enough, and he's studied the human language enough to be able to kind of understand it, but he doesn't speak it very fluently. So he's kind of having to reconnoiter and pretend to be human for a bit in the first part of the book, and he's really bad at it. So that's some of my favorite bits, when he kind of is wandering around trying to be human and probably fooling no one. So that was quite fun, and it is very handy for the writer to deliver exposition via this dragon who knows nothing. So that was fun, and showing his attitude, because at the beginning he really hates humans. He's not very pleased with them at all. The kind of background setup of this world is that hundreds of years ago, humans and dragons had a very symbiotic relationship, but the humans betrayed the dragons and banished them to a dying world. But of course, humans don't live as long as dragons, so many centuries have passed. And they have forgotten what they did, and they now worship dragons as gods. But the dragon gods remember, and they do not forgive, is sort of my tagline. So I kind of jumped off from the point of, what if your gods hated you? And it would be interesting to play with. But they're not actually gods. They are dragons.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, how they were actually banished by humans in the first place, and now humans have forgotten all about what they've done, which is quite typical of humans, and now worship them as gods. Could you talk a bit more about why you decided to put that dynamic in?
Yeah, I think it was sort of one of my jumping off points, because actually the series idea gestation didn't quite start with dragons. It started with the little stone seals that all the humans wear. Because I was walking around I always forget what it's called, the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, where they have like the recreation of the Assyrian gate, Ishtar gate and stuff. And they had these little stone cylinders that, you know, are carved with markings. And there was a little placard that said sometimes people thought of them as magical amulets. And that was like my little plot bunny. So the whole rest of the day walking through the museum, I was like, what would a culture be like if all your magic was funneled through this little thing that was also like your identity? If you signed contract, it was sort of magically binding. It could be a way for people to kind of track you, like the government, perhaps, almost like a cell phone today, but in a very, very magical sense. And that I found really interesting, but that was still just like a cool world building detail. It wasn't an actual story. So I started thinking, okay, well, if they're kind of using stolen magic, who did they steal it from? And then that's where I was like, aha, now I can write my dragon book. Write one for a long time.
I know, like in the book, the chapters mainly switch between Everin and Arcady. There are others, but obviously Everin's chapters are through his perspective. So how did you find jumping into the perspective of a dragon? Like, how did you do that?
Well, I made life very complicated for myself because I have 4 main points of view, but most are Everin and Arcady. The third one is Soren, who's the assassin. The fourth one is Cassia, who's Everin's sister and the queen in waiting left behind in the dragon world. And then there's a sneaky 5th one that I can't mention for spoiler reasons. But I also have 3 different narrative positions in the same book, which is a fundamentally slightly mad thing to do. So Everin's not only a dragon, but he's also writing in like the least common narrative position, which is first person direct address. So he's writing all of his sections like it's a letter addressed to Arcady, the thief, who's writing in first person. And then Cassie and Soren are in third person. And I did that for various reasons, which we can come back to later. But for Everin in particular, I thought using this uncommon narrative position was a really interesting opportunity because it's very like confronting because I'm constantly saying you in the text. It makes him kind of sound dangerous, like a predator. But I thought it fit really well for a dragon to kind of be this sort of like haughty, like imperious kind of tone, but it's also very intimate as well. And you find out at the end of the book why he's writing it directly to Arcady. Like, is this a confession? Is this a love letter? Is it both? You have to read to find out.
So when you were writing about the dragon, there are quite a few like funny moments in the book where he uses words that he's obviously seeing human things through a dragon perspective. So like mammary glands, for example. So how did you find the balance between making him a dragon and then him pretending to be a human or still understandable by human readers?
Yeah, it was quite fun to do because, basically at every point through his chapters, I had to be like, okay, how would a dragon interpret this? Like even different facial expressions, like to him smiling a certain way is like a sign of aggression, you know? And he knows enough that it's not a sign of aggression, but he still rankles at it. Or, you know, he works for a time and is having to take orders from a human. He doesn't like that. The way he would describe things, I'd sometimes use sort of more draconic terminology, like more mentions of teeth and claws and prey and things like that. Like dragons don't have mammary glands because they don't nurse their young. So that's something he would notice when he comes across a stranger who looks a bit different because, you know, he hasn't seen any humans before this point in time. Another interesting element to his sort of upbringing is that he is the last male dragon. So every other dragon or person that he's ever interacted with has been a female dragon. And he's been raised to be like the savior of his kind, the chosen one, but also a bit feared just by virtue of being the last male dragon, because the previous one went mad and burned a bunch of prophecies and things like that.
Yeah. We've got a question from Claire. Oh, if anyone has any questions, please do ask them as well, and we'll do our best to answer them. So Claire has asked, did you do much research on dragon mythology?
Oh, I did so much. just pausing because there's a siren outside, and I don't know if you can hear it or if Zoom is doing its job of.
I can hear it. Oh, it's gone now. It's gone.
There it goes.
Almost.
Still going. I live somewhere where there are quite a lot of sirens, so that might not be the only one. But yes, I did a lot of research into dragon mythology, like mostly kind of Eastern Europe, because you have a lot of the ones that can kind of turn humanoid there. I also looked a lot at like Celtic kind of inspirations of dragons, some Eastern influence as well, though I didn't draw on that as much. I thought about like what dragons mean to society, why every culture kind of has its own, what they're associated with. So some are associated with certain elements or luck or things like that. And that helped inspire the magic system as well, because in the human world, there are 5 different colored dragons in the dragon world as well. But in the human world, each dragon color is kind of associated with 2 different main types of magic. And you're kind of born able to access one of them a little bit easier, but it's still not very easy to obtain a lot of magic as well. And we can talk about that later as well. But yeah, I did loads of research on dragon myth and all of that, and it was super fun and a great method of procrastination as well. Right yet, I have to know everything about dragons everywhere history of ever before I can even think to begin.
That would be a great mastermind topic if you ever wanted to go and mastermind special subject dragons.
Yeah, I have many things I could talk about ad nauseum. Like that's part of the fun things. Like the funnest thing about being a writer is that you get to just like nerd out about different subjects and like hyper focus on certain things while you're writing a book.
Oh, we've got a couple more questions. Elizabeth was asked, is there a part of Emberclaw that you're super excited or nervous for readers to get to? No spoilers necessary.
Yeah, it's kind of like I'm at that point now where I'm like, oh gosh, this is actually going to go out in the world in the next few months. Because book 2 is a little bit delayed. It took me a lot longer to write. I found it really hard in certain respects. And I really wanted to do it justice, so I didn't want to rush it. But book 2 is kind of basically my magic university book, my magical tournament book. And neither of those are spoilers because you'll see it in the cover copy. So as someone who's spent a long time in academia and who's loved reading those kind of like magic tournament arcs and magic university books, I think I've kind of found my own take and approach to things, which will be quite fun. And yeah, you'll see a lot of familiar faces coming back on board. It all kind of kicks off about 3 months after Dragonfall ends. And there are also some dream sequences in particular I'm excited for readers to read.
Thank you. We've got a question from Laura. What did you find most challenging about writing from a non-human point of view?
Yeah, like the balance of like how human versus how not to be. Because my dragons can turn into humanoid shapes, like I figured they wouldn't be quite as alien as someone who is only ever in a dragon form. So that means in some respects they're not radically different to humans. And that's been interesting because there have been a few readers being like, well, I don't know if Everin seems dragony enough. And I'm like, do you have a dragon that you can ask? So I took my approach to dragons and how I think their sort of society would be and how they would act. They're an interesting people, the dragons in my world, I think, because they have, nursed this hatred for a long time, but they're also trapped in this dying world. Like they have to find a way to get back to the human world or they're not going to survive. Like it keeps getting hotter. That's why there's only one male dragon at the moment, because it's the temperature of the outside that can affect the sex that certain lizards and sea turtles hatch as. So I just stole that and added it to the book. And also I thought it was hilarious that I technically have a scientific reason why 99.9% of my dragons are lesbians.
Yeah, that is a good reason. Another thing that I was thinking about, that you've just kind of touched on that with someone being like, your dragon's not dragony enough, but something that I actually liked about Averin and Arcadia as well is that even though they live in this like magical fantasy world and Averin's a dragon, they still have very like normal human qualities. Like Arcadia, for example, feels really self-conscious because they don't think that they're there is a worth being of someone who looks like Everin, and then Everin also has these sort of family traumas from feeling like a failure with his family. So why did you decide to make these characters still have that relatable qualities even in such a fantastical novel?
Yeah, I suppose I was hoping that everyone would recognize at least a bit of themselves or someone they know in these two characters. So yeah, both Everin and Arcady have crippling imposter syndrome in different ways, or lots of emotional baggage. That means they have a lot of defenses up, they have a lot of walls up. And what's interesting, or what was really interesting in writing it, is that because they're kind of bonded or half bonded through most of the book, those walls are kind of forced to come down. And the kind of one of the central problems of the book is that they're stuck in this half bond. So both of their magic is muted. Everin's trapped in human form, so he can't turn into a dragon even if he wanted to, and he's hiding that he's a dragon from Arcady, which of course goes about as swimmingly as you can imagine. And then Arcady as well, like their magic is dampened. They can't hold spells for as long. And they're also, if one person is injured, the injury is mirrored on the other person, which I thought would be really interesting and sort of force them to have to work together because, if one of them goes and gets killed, the other one would go with it. And the only way to complete that bond is through trust. So I had to take these two very broken, very defensive people and basically make them go like this. Or like little kisses. Although I kept trying to get them to kiss, and it kept moving more and more in the book because I was like, no, you're not ready yet.
Yeah, there was so much tension, and it's not just like will they, won't they? It's like they literally can't because it will be painful.
And they can't physically touch without Arcady causing Everin pain, which in retrospect I realized set me up for all sorts of delicious tension. But they do find some creative loopholes, is all I'll say.
We've got a couple more questions. Elizabeth was asked, what's your favorite part of Dragonfall?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's some of the quieter moments. Like there's a chapter where Arcady and Everin are kind of speaking to each other through a wall. And they kind of have to break down their defenses a little bit more that way. I also really like the scene that takes place on the beach. I like the dancing rooftop scene. I think I like a lot of the like sweet kind of tender moments in the book. And I really like the very closing part as well when I kind of answer that condition of narration. So yeah, there's lots of bits and bobs I really love about Dragonfall.
Thank you. Maybe Elizabeth, you could share with us your favorite part of Dragonfall as well. That would be really nice to hear. We've got a question from Amy, and this is a great one because we are an audiobook charity. Did you have in mind how the book would sound when read aloud for the audiobook?
Yeah, so my publisher sent me through like a couple sort of audition tapes of a couple of readers, and one of them was Philip, who does all the dragon characters. And I loved him right away. He's Turkish, but he's been in the UK for a really long time, so he has like a very soft accent that I thought really fit Everin in particular. And he has a great way of speaking, and it sounds very lovely, and I thought fit really well. And then I really wanted them to hire a non-binary actor for Arcady. And so Rebecca reads all of the human characters, and they did a fantastic job as well. So this is my first time having more than one narrator in an audiobook, and that was very exciting. I haven't managed to listen to much of it because I just can't listen to my own words really after the fact because I keep wanting to like change things or just it's too much for me. But I've heard from quite a few people that they really enjoy the audiobook, and that makes me really happy.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook and it was really good. I did find that Philip, his voice is very dragon-like. Like it's just like if you could imagine a dragon having a voice, that would be the voice a dragon would have.
Yeah, and it's a very attractive voice. Well done, Philip.
In response to what is Elizabeth's favorite part of Dragonfall, it's all of it. The tender moments too, and also their little dance practice.
Yes, I do enjoy their dance practice where they get slightly distracted.
Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. If anyone else has any other favorite moments, it would be great to hear those. But with the audiobook in particular, did you have much involvement in like the production of the audiobook or how you wanted it to sound, or was that completely like I don't want to hear
No, sort of once they were cast, I think the publisher usually sort of takes it over. Sometimes they'll kind of query pronunciation things and that sort of thing, because I do have like a made up language in it, which I worked with a linguist on. So all of the Selenian in the book is a working language that I've developed with Seamus, the red wizard, who actually always wears a red wizard hat. They're great. Shout out to Seamus if you see this later.
Hi, Seamus. So you have a whole language, and will you go back to that then throughout the series using that language?
So you get some more glimpses of Selenian in book 2. There's like a couple last outstanding queries I have out with Seamus at the moment for a couple of spells, because basically the way humans use magic is they speak Selenian, but again they don't understand the dragon language anymore because it's been so long. So there's quite a funny moment where like Everin is realizing they're just like butchering the pronunciation of the language, and he's so irritated. But it's sort of how they focus and direct the magic to do certain spells. It's not the only way to do magic, as you'll find out, but it's sort of what the humans have fallen into how they've learned how to use it.
So that's really interesting with the language. I haven't realized, but I have always wondered this. When you have a language in a book, do you kind of develop the entire language beforehand, or do you just go along with whatever phrases are necessary and then make them up?
So because I worked with a linguist, like they've done sort of the bigger kind of rules and stuff of the grammar and the way that they approach things in a way that I just would not be able to. I would have made up some sounds that maybe sounded realistic, but might have fallen apart really quickly. Whereas like obviously Seamus hasn't come up with every word ever, but they've come up with the system and they've studied linguistics and are interested in conlang in a way that they can continue to keep developing it to the point where, you know, it could become something like Klingon and a full working language. I don't know if it'll ever get there, but it's an opportunity. And it was really fun. It's really fun to like send off my instructions of like, hey, can you make this phrase for me, and see what they come back with. And sometimes they'll kind of give me options, like you could either have this word or this word, like which spelling or which word sounds better. And sometimes I just have to like choose one off my gut and not know why it sounded more dragon-like, but it was really fun. So we have a lot of kind of V sounds and K sounds and kind of, you know, harsh dragony sounds, which is really fun.
Yeah, that sounds like such a dream job, being able to like create a language.
Yeah, and I know they're interested in developing other conlangs down the line. So yeah, you can always reach out to me if you want to hire their services at any point. Anyone who's listening, I'm sure they'd be delighted to.
Yeah, so anyone who is listening who also is a writer, I wonder if you have any sort of like top tips you could share with people in the audience about maybe getting started if you're having like writer's block or something.
Yeah, so writer's block is hard. It's something I struggled with a lot last year. And for me, at least, writer's block always kind of comes down to just confidence. So if you're feeling uncertain, or you feel like you've kind of gotten yourself into a corner, a lot of the time you need to maybe step back, refill the well. Or I'm a big fan of just kind of like free writing longhand. I find for me, my brain works a little bit differently when, you know, if I'm staring at a blank page on the screen and I get really intimidated, I can kind of trick myself into being like, oh, I'm just like writing down ideas. It doesn't matter, like no one will ever see this. And I'll maybe start doing planning or talking about what could happen in the scene that I'm stuck on. And then I'll find myself sort of falling into it. And I think probably my other top tip too is like, it's okay to do little and often. It will all add up. Even if you only write like 200, 250 words a day, if you do that almost every day, within a year or so, you'd have a book. So if you tell yourself, okay, I only need to write like X number of words, or even if I don't reach 200 words, that's fine. But a lot of the time it's just the act of getting started and getting going that's the hardest part. And then you get into it and you start to have fun, and suddenly you realize you've written a lot more than you thought you would.
Yeah. It must be quite intimidating having like a set of words each day that you need to write. I don't know if I could work like that. Like I think I'd have to do the same as you, like just kind of go and write and not have like a set target, or I don't know. We've got a really nice comment from Nina, who said, my favourite bit is actually the smooth tension build up before they meet properly and they are pseudo aware of each other. It was chef's kiss. I know it happens early in the book, but made it a delight to keep reading. Thank you, Nina, for sharing.
Oh, thank you. That's good to hear, because like I'm kind of releasing a book like in the middle of like the romantasy trend, right? Which kind of has a specific sort of story arc, and you'd maybe have like the meet cute quite early in the book, comparatively, like 10 or 15%. And my characters, they technically meet right at the beginning, but they don't properly meet physically until the end of part 1, which is, I don't know, 75 pages or so into it. And so kind of according to the romance arc structure, that's a little bit later than normal, but I think it worked for the fantasy to give you the space to kind of settle into the world, to get to know these characters individually before I, shove them back together. So I'm glad that worked for you.
Yeah, it worked for me too. That kind of builds on another thing that I was wondering. When you're writing fantasy in particular, when you're setting up a whole new world, how would you go about plotting that and creating this new world? Because it sounds really hard to me to write about somewhere that isn't like even the UK. Like I wouldn't know where to begin.
Yeah, so I've kind of created sort of a world Bible where I kind of keep track of bigger things like the history of the world. I knew I didn't want to have more than like 3 or 4 countries, because the more you have, the more you have to develop. And I know too that like this isn't a series where they travel loads anyway. Like there is potentially scope to open it up later. But for the moment, both book 1 and book 2 is primarily set in Loch and in the capital city of Vatra in particular. So I have a little bit of travel, but not too much yet. So I have Loch and Myria, which used to be one country, but they've separated about 30 years before the book began, because I thought that would be really interesting to navigate, like a semi-recent coup that's kind of within the previous generation's memory. And Arcadie's grandparent, who's known as the Plague Bringer now, and Arcadie is determined to kind of clear his name and prove that he didn't actually release this plague, would have been involved or at least present during that coup. And so that was interesting to play with. I also wanted to have a more antagonistic country, so I've got Jask to the south, which is a little bit more Nordic based. And then I've got a little kind of bit of islands over to the side called the Glass Isles, and I've got the Dragon World as well. And this is my first time where I've had a map in a book, so that was very exciting. I'll show you the map real quick, because that was like always a dream growing up. I was like, I want a map. So it was super exciting. And the maker of the map is Devin Rue. So if you've watched Critical Role, she's done some maps for them. And I made a very basic bad version of this in a program called Incarnate. And Devin Rue very kindly was like, none of your rivers make sense whatsoever. So she fixed all my rivers. And so, yeah, it was really fun.
That's really interesting, because I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't know that there was a map. But then again, like, I didn't necessarily feel like I needed one. Like I still could figure out where the countries were, what things look like. So I guess that's a compliment.
Yeah. Well, I wrote book 1 not expecting a map, because it is an extra expense. You're never quite sure if you're going to get a map. But I was like, I'm going to ask for a map, and I was so delighted when my publisher happily commissioned one. So I kind of thought about the setting of the world, the weather, but also like culture. When are the holidays? What are the swear words? Is always a fun one. What do they find like blasphemous? And yeah, like my big thing is I knew I really wanted to make this a queer norm world. So Loch in particular, not the whole world. Jask is still more like traditionally patriarchal. And Loch Myria kind of used to be a bit more like that, but it's moved away from it. And so in Loch in particular, it's considered rude to assume a stranger's gender. So if you see, a shopkeeper in a shop or whatever, and you don't know them, you would always default to they, them, no matter how they present, because it's just considered in that culture a little bit rude to assume before they have told you. So, once you get to know someone and you kind of go from formality to more informal, you would, for example, like, flash your pronouns in a sign language, and it's sort of just, here is me, I'm she, he, or they, or any. And it doesn't even break the flow of conversation, but everyone just sort of, adjusts and moves on, and it's not remotely a big deal. And that's something that was really important to me as a non-binary creator, to just experiment with gender being a bit more open and fluid, and not just tolerated, but celebrated.
Yeah. There's a really nice moment in the book where Meryl is teaching Everin about how to use the signs, and about the sort of gender norms, or lack of, in Locke. And also, it mentions that babies are gender neutral until they get old enough to decide for themselves, which is another really nice touch, I thought. But I wanted to ask, why did you decide to have this moment in the book of where Everin is educated on it, rather than just assume, like, it is a queer norm world, so it could have just been kind of like, oh, well, that's just the way the world is, he can deal with it himself. So why did you decide to have the moment of educating him on it?
Yeah, it was something I kind of like put in and took out a few times, because, it is a bit like, let me explain the rules to you. But it is quite short. It's like a page and a half, if that. And I decided to leave it in because, one, he is a dragon who's only been raised around females. So he has even less knowledge of gender than even like you or I would. And two, because like there's going to be a range of people who read the book. Some people are going to be, already very aware of kind of, gender and sexuality and all of that. But there will be some people where this is maybe the first time they've ever, read about non-binary characters, for example. So I thought it was important to kind of try to split the difference, to, give a bit of an explanation. It does come a bit later. It's still in part one, but it's not like right at the front. So hopefully the reader would have caught on. But if they're still like, what is going on? Why is everyone them? You kind of have this moment of checking in. But I also just liked that scene from an emotional, like, character point. Like, Meryl is a sex worker that Everin accidentally hires because he's and bad at being human. But they had like a really kind of nice, genuine moment as well, when like, she realized he's a bit in over his head, and kind of just gives him that little bit of education he needs to fit into the world a bit more. And it's kind of, right before the rest of the book kicks off. So it's sort of that slower moment before we kick into the next bit. So in the end, I decided to keep it in. And I think it is important because, yes, a reader might, read and deduce it, but I also don't think it's a bad thing to just upfront state very quickly, like, this is how the world works. And I thought it was important to put in.
Yeah, it actually was one of my favorite moments of the book, along with the ending, the big reveal, which Guido has also said, the reveal at the end really gets my thumbs up, with a little wink emoji.
Thank you.
Anna Elizabeth made a great comment. Who needs a meet cute when you can meet at knife point? Very true.
Yeah, I did weave in a couple of my favorite tropes, and one of them is knife to throat. I also have, like, there's only one bed, except there's only one beach, and they have to huddle for warmth. That was another one.
Nina's commented, it was a refreshing teaching style moment, reminiscent of me explaining non-binary to my nan, who has a relatively low exposure to that topic, reflective of the real world.
Yeah. Part of that scene came in too, because like my mom read an earlier version of it, and she's very like au fait with things. But if even she was having a little bit of trouble following it, I was like, okay, I'll put in a little bit more, just because I didn't want people to misinterpret either, or to get frustrated if they hadn't quite put it all into play yet. So I thought it worked.
Yeah. And Everin is a dragon. Like, you can't really... Like,
it's really coming from an outsider's perspective here.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. And then I have another scene later on where Arcady is briefly explaining to Everin what it means to them to be non-binary as well. And I thought that was likewise important to put in, because there have been a few instances where people are a bit like, oh, well, the character's non-binary, get over it. Why do you have to like bang on about it? And I'm a bit like, it's literally 2.5 pages in the whole book. And also, like, it's not a dirty secret, we can talk about it. We can discuss what it means to be non-binary in a book that's all about gender. It's set up in a way the narrative positions are set up so that Arcady is not gendered within the text as much. And there are people who read Arcady as they, them, or as he, she, or he or she. And I never state what physical sex this character has either. I don't even know myself. So I really leave a lot open to the reader, and that was a very intentional decision.
Lizzie's commented, "Mum makes a good test audience. Love it."
Yeah, my mom's like my ultimate hype woman. She like reads everything. She's also an English teacher, so she fixes my commas that are always willy-nilly as well. But yeah, and so yeah, she's a good kind of test reader.
Yeah, English teachers are always the best. I say that as someone who studied English at uni, so
it's sometimes a bit embarrassing because obviously they're like slightly spicy scenes. But my mom reads them all with gusto.
No, it's good. And when it's a dragon, I feel like you just have to deal with it. It's worth it. Elizabeth commented when we were talking about the map, love the map and Devon Rue.
Yeah, Devon Rue is lovely. I did an event with her and Wesley Chu and Andrea Stewart around launch last year for a bookstore called Fable Hollow Bookstore, and it was really interesting just hearing like how she approaches making the maps and stuff like that. Like, it was really cool.
So we were just talking about gender, and obviously Arcady is gender fluid. So I just wanted to ask, why was that? Why did you decide to have a gender fluid main character? Why was that important to you?
Yeah, so it's not my first time writing a non-binary character either. My first trilogy, which starts with Pantomime, has an intersex non-binary protagonist. And I wrote that in my early 20s, back before I'd kind of gone through my own sort of gender journey. So this was sort of me coming back to wanting to have a more expansive view of gender in fantasy, which historically can have quite like regressive gender roles sometimes. Like we're having a lot of great diverse fantasy in so many different ways, but I haven't quite seen many other people approach gender the way that I have in Dragonfall. So I thought it would just be interesting to add a different point to the canon and to allow people to see themselves in a genre that maybe they haven't seen themselves in before. And I've gotten some really beautiful notes from readers to that effect. Like in my dedication, I said that I'm going to cry, but I said that I wanted it to feel like home.
Oh, that's so nice. You're gonna make me cry. Whenever anyone cries, I'm just like, it sets me off.
I'm going through some stuff like outside of everything where I'm a bit more prone to crying than I normally am, so it's fine. I'll be fine in a second.
No, and it is a safe space here as well, so I hope it feels like home as well. Oh, Elizabeth commented, it absolutely feels like home. That's really nice. Lizzie's also said that I haven't seen the map yet, as my my ARC didn't have one. I have an excuse to buy another copy now. Laughing emoji. That's always good. It's always good to have an excuse to buy another book. Yes. And Lizzie sent some hugs emojis, which is really nice too. Yeah, I'm sending a virtual hug. Elizabeth said, also, yes, definitely an excuse to buy more copies. Did you have any involvement with the cover art? Like, obviously, I feel like with fantasy, cover art can be so elaborate, detailed, beautiful. So how did you find that experience of this?
Yeah, it was really lovely and collaborative. So Daw Books, my US publisher, sent me kind of like a short list of 4 authors, and one of them was Michaela Alkino, and I've been loving her covers for ages. Like if you go to any bookstore, particularly in the UK, she's very popular at the moment. So like I'm looking at my shelves again. City of Stardust by Georgia Summers has her, Jennifer Saint. Yeah, quite a lot of authors have been graced with Michaela's beautiful art. My main point to them was like, please put a dragon on it. Like I want a giant dragon on the cover. And I think we can all agree that Michaela really nailed the brief here. And it hasn't been like technically officially revealed, but the Ember Claw cover is floating about if you look for it. And it's got a purple dragon instead. So yeah, it was really lovely. And this is the US edition, but the UK one had foil as well, and it was shiny, which was very cool. And there have been some special editions with sprayed edges. In the US, there's going to be the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which has red sprayed edges, which is very exciting. So yeah, I'm really happy with Michaela Alcaino's cover. It was like a dream come true. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, Lizzie said, I peeped the cover for the sequel on Amazon and you picked the right artist for sure. I agree. It's so nice. It's such a nice cover. Laura said, after reading Dragonfall, it was harder to accustom to this world that's weirder about gender. I completely had the same experience. I remember there's one line in particular where Everin said, what if I told you I was a she? And then Meryl's just said, well, I'd adjust. Like, it's just so...
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and then you come back to this world and you think, what's so hard? What's so hard?
I guess it's something that I just find so frustrating, obviously, because it's become such a subject of a culture war. And releasing a book that's so queer kind of in the middle of that has been quite like confronting and difficult sometimes. But I guess I just fundamentally will never understand why people won't just trust people. Like, if they tell you the truth of themselves, why not just believe them? And like, why does it hurt you? It doesn't actually need to hurt you to just believe them and respect them and listen to them. And the world would be a kinder and more beautiful place if we did that.
Yeah, definitely. Elizabeth's commented, absolutely adore the non-binary rep. Thank you for it, and sorry for all the questions. Elizabeth, please
don't be sorry. We want questions. It's a Q&A. Don't worry.
Yeah, the questions have been amazing, so don't ever apologize for them. But another question was, I love mentally attaching songs to books. If Dragonfall had a movie, what song would you definitely want to be part of the soundtrack? Thank you.
Oh, there's what is it called? There's a song that has like a line in it that like, I'm an angel. I'm going to have to Google it because it's going to bother me. I think it's the Cardigan, You're the Storm, the Cardigans. Yeah, You're the Storm by the Cardigans. And I'll find the particular lyric. It's, I'm an angel bored like hell and you're a devil meaning well. You steal my lines and you strike me down. Come raise your flag upon me. And if you want me, I'm your country, that sort of thing. And then it says, if you're the storm that I believe in. And there's a lot about storms and stuff within the book. So that was like one of the ones that would be on my playlist. And then my friend's been making me these really lovely videos because I do not know how to make videos. So she's made little, I've minimized my, there we are, there you're back. She's made little kind of like character videos for the 4 POVs and assigned songs to each of them. And I thought she did a really great job of choosing them as well.
Elizabeth said, ooh, love it. And Guido said, love that song. So that's got approval already if there's ever to be a movie.
That's the one that jumps to my head. But I like to listen to a lot of instrumental music. And weirdly, I listened to a lot of Enya singing in Elvish while writing this book. So I'm sure that
I can see that.
Things. I mean, Enya was my most listened to artist last year. But like, I love her music. I wish she would like release more music in Elvish.
maybe Enya will come out of retirement to make the soundtrack for Dragonfall. That would be pretty cool. So Lizzie has asked. Oh, Elizabeth has said Enya, yes. Lizzie has asked, how many books will be in the series? Sorry if you've already answered this. I joined late.
Yeah, it's currently slightly up in the air, so I cannot answer that at this time. And there's a few reasons why, but I'll just leave it there.
And Lizzie's also said Ruel songs would fit really well too. I haven't listened to
Ruel.
I haven't
listened to Ruel. I'll look them up. Oh, I also really love Aurora. Her songs are kind of a similar vibe as well.
Do you have any like dream actors in mind that could play like Everin in his human form and Arcady?
The guy who plays Randall Thor in Wheel of Time, maybe, but I do imagine Everin probably a bit more like angular. So actually my answer is Brendan Fraser's son, the one who's the redhead. Oh. If you Google them, there was this meme that went around that was like Brendan with his beautiful sons, and someone said like one is an Anne Rice vampire and one is a Stephanie Meyer vampire, and I cannot answer more at this time. So he is the Anne Rice vampire. So he would be great. And then for Arcady, the actor who was in season 2 of Wheel of Time and also in Fallout, they're a non-binary actor, and I think they would be great.
We've got Nina, who definitely supports your choice, saying yes, the elvish redhead, all in capital letters.
Elvish redhead. Yes. I have no idea if he is remotely interested in acting, considering how much CGI dragon stuff this would require. I think its odds of getting adapted are quite low, but you never know. We can live and dream.
I would love to see how they would make like the preterite form on film or on TV. Like, I'd really like.
Basically, kind of elvish, fae. They've got some pointy ears. They've got some dragon contacts they would need. Some kind of feathered hair. And lightly pebbled skin might be hard to do. They might not bother with that. Optional.
Elizabeth is seconding Ruel, so that will definitely be something I'll have to look into.
Yeah, I'll listen to them.
Lizzie said this would be stunning animated, to be fair.
Oh, that would be beautiful. Yeah, I would be very open to that as well.
Yeah.
But alas, it's not quite in our control. But if it ever happens, I'd be very excited.
You just reminded me of something. The feathers. I wanted to ask, why feathers on the dragons?
Because on the one hand, Everin is kind of like a sexy fallen dragon angel, so I wanted to kind of play with that vibe. For a while, I was trying to decide if I wanted them to have like bat wings or full bird wings, but I decided to split the difference, so they're bat wings with like feathers on top. And also, I was like, well, dinosaurs have feathers, so I feel like dragons can also have feathers.
Yeah, and birds are like the ancestors of dinosaurs, right? So
yeah, and it kind of vaguely is analogous to like phoenixes and stuff as well. Like I think this dragon looks very slightly phoenixy as well. So I just thought it would be fun to kind of play with that blend and with that aesthetic.
Yeah. Elizabeth said would love to see that. I think that's the animation or the TV or film. If cosplayers can do it, TV can.
Yeah, I would love it. So, you know.
And Lizzie is manifesting it for you, which is lovely. Thanks, Lizzie. And Lizzie's also asked, are there any new creatures in the next book?
No, but you will get a little bit more wyverns. There was a wyvern race that I had to cut from book 1 because it just did not belong there. It was just there for pure wish fulfillment, but had no bearing on the plot whatsoever. But I found a plot relevant reason to put the wyvern race in book 2, and I was so delighted I got to put it back in and switch it up. So yes, you get to see some little wyverns race around. But yeah, no new magical creatures, but more dragons and more wyverns. You get to see more of Vercelin in book 2 as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for. I'd like to see Vercelin. Lizzie said, I love the tiny dragons, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I love them too. That was inspired by Anne McCaffrey and Pern, because there were also like the little lizardlings in some of her series, and I actually called them lizardlings for quite a few drafts until I realized I also have starveling, and that's just too many limbs. So I switched it to wyvern.
We are coming close to the end, so if anyone has any more questions, please do pop them in and we'll try and get through as many as we can. We've got another question from Elizabeth, who's asked, this is a great one, if Arcady and Everin were drinks or snacks, what drink or snack would they be?
Oh, I think Everin would probably be like a smoky whiskey, perhaps.
Ooh, definitely.
Arcady's a bit harder. I don't know. Maybe like black tea or something, like a little bit bitter, but very comforting at the same time. And in terms of snacks, I have these little sweet spheres, which are because you have to physically eat quite a lot to use magic, because it uses up energy, because all magic has to have a cost. So they need to sometimes just really shovel in the calories to be able to do magic. So they have these little kind of like honey seed things called sweet spheres that would probably be quite tasty.
Yeah, Nina's commented, which I think is referring to Arcady and Everin, they are both snacks.
Aw, thank you.
Thank you for all of your questions, everybody. We are coming close to the end, but we have like a couple more minutes if you have any last minute ones to sneak in. But yeah, as we're here, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a great conversation, and it's been great to hear all of your lovely comments about the book as well.
Yeah, it's been really lovely getting questions from people who've read the books, because a lot of the time when you're doing sort of Q&A, especially I did a bunch last year, and it was kind of before people had much chance to read the books yet. So it's really nice to hear from readers. It's really lovely. I write to connect, so it's always really lovely when you hear it has connected. So thank you for spending some time in my world with my dragons.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining us as well. It's been such an amazing conversation. But yeah, just to wrap up, thanks everyone. And just as a reminder, we're an audiobook charity, and we provide access to thousands of books, including Dragonfall, and hopefully the rest of the books whenever they're available in audio. So if you do think we could help you access books, please check us out, and come back for more Q&As. So thanks everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.